You're listening to Halftime with your host, Milan Bittenbender, where each week we take a few minutes to step off the field of life and discuss the challenges and joys of navigating life in the middle years. I hope your time with us today will help you develop your strategy for a winning second half. Welcome to the locker room. You're among friends. Hello there, and welcome to Halftime. Actually, welcome to my very first episode of this podcast. I'm excited to be able to share this with you, and this episode is going to be unique. It's going to be a little bit different than all the rest. This one is going to be what I consider my vision episode. This is the episode that I would like to share with you what this podcast means to me and what I hope it'll mean for all of you. There's not going to be a guest with me today. It's just going to be me talking. So if you get bored as we go on, feel free to shut it down and pick up another one of the episodes. We've got some great conversations there, and I'm sure you'll be inspired by those. But I did want to start by sharing my vision. I wanted to start by sharing a little bit of my story and a little bit of why I'm doing this and what I hope that this will do for me and for others, anyone that tunes in to this podcast. First of all, the vision is a little bit of a locker room at halftime. We talk about this being the halftime podcast, and although it's not sports related, it kind of has this concept, this idea that halfway through a game, the team steps off the field to take a rest, to kind of observe what's happening on the field, to discuss what's happening with the rest of the teammates, how the game is going, what's working, what's not working. And then from there, kind of talk about some strategies for the second half. Because if you keep doing what you were doing in the first half, you're going to keep getting the same results in the second half. And as in life, we find that it's very important to step aside at different times, to retreat, if you will, and take a look at how things are going. And through this podcast, through the conversations that we have with a number of different guests, you're going to be able to kind of compare notes with others who are in a similar season of life, how things are working for them and may be working for you, how things were not working for them and may not be working for you. And we'll also talk about the kinds of strategies, the things that we've learned and the lessons that we've learned and the experiences that we've had that have helped us to unlock keys to a strategy for moving forward. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you don't want to just come out of halftime and do the same thing and get the same results and hopefully make it through the game. You don't want to just survive. You want to win. My goal is that we can learn how to win in life and be excited about finishing this life strong and finishing well and finishing victoriously. So I want to start by saying part of what you need to understand about me is that I'm in this midlife mess myself. Right? I don't feel like I've made it through midlife. I feel like I'm still right in the middle of it. I'm dealing with a lot of the midlife issues. I'm going to talk about those in a few minutes. So for me, this is very important because I'm personally facing a lot of the challenges that we're going to be talking about. A lot of the episodes are coming out of my own need and my own desire. And I'm not approaching this as if I'm some got it together professional or I'm the head coach who has all the answers. And if you'll just come into halftime, into the locker room, I'll help you figure it out too. But I'm actually approaching this as a fellow teammate, a player on the field, somebody who's been hit several times myself and who's really looking for the insights and the strategy to go back out onto the field for a better second half than even my first half. I do believe that our best days are ahead. And I think it's part of that drive that makes me want to do this. And as somebody who has spent most of my life in ministry, public ministry, being very public about my life and speaking publicly, sharing my faith publicly, and all of that, it just makes sense for me to do this journey publicly and to make it possible for all of you to join us on this journey of discovery. And so my hope is that you will find the support, the encouragement, the insights, the help that you need as you go through your own midlife journey and into your second half years. I want to talk for a moment about that word crisis. We often talk about midlife being a crisis. What exactly is a crisis? I looked up the definition, and basically, it's a time of intense difficulty or struggle when critical decisions must be made to ensure a safe or productive future. It's kind of a fulcrum point. It's a time and a situation where critical decisions have to be made, and the decisions that are made are going to drastically affect the outcome of the future that's on the other side of those decisions. And oftentimes we call midlife the midlife challenge is a midlife crisis. And for some people, it is absolutely a crisis. For others, it doesn't feel so much like a crisis. But I've found through conversations that almost everybody is still facing a lot of the struggles and the challenges or going through some of the midlife struggles. And so I want to take a minute, and I've got some notes in front of me. So if you're watching this on YouTube or something, pardon the eyes off the camera, but I want to read through some of these because I think some of these may hit where you live, and they may make sense to you. But I want to talk a little bit about what a midlife crisis or what the midlife struggle is, what it looks like, so we can know if we're on the same page or not, as far as what this whole podcast is about, and what it might help you with. What we find is a lot of times in midlife, there's radically changing family dynamics. In midlife, which we would consider the years maybe between 40 and 60, some people hit midlife as early as 35. I've had a few people tell me, man, I felt like I was in midlife at 35, and others felt like it didn't really hit till their mid 50s. But I would say in that 40 to 60 year range is kind of the middle of the adult years. And that's when oftentimes the children grow up, and all of a sudden there's an empty nest. The family dynamics radically change when the children are not dependent upon you and they're not in the home anymore. That can affect a marriage, and it can affect the way that a husband and wife relate. It definitely affects the way that parents relate to their children. It affects the way parents feel about how they raise their children, whether they made mistakes or if they're proud of the way that they parented, and the results that their children are living with. Um, Growing children, aging children, adult children have are facing their own problems, and those problems can be way more complex even than the problems of little children, because the effects of the challenges or the problems that they're facing as adults are much farther reaching, and much more impacting. The other changing family dynamics is aging parents. It's this stage of life where a lot of people feel like all of a sudden the people that cared for me all of my life need my care. They need me to be taking care of them. Maybe parents are struggling with a severe illness or are needing intense support, financial support, any of those kinds of things. I know I personally have parents who are very healthy. They're doing great. I praise God for that. At the same time, they're in their late 70s and mid 80s, and I know that anything could happen at any time. And I pray for them, and I'm concerned for them. But I know many of my friends, much of their time and energy is spent taking care of their parents. This is also a time of professional disappointment, maybe the loss of a role, or experiencing a big failure. Looking back and wondering, what in the world did I do wrong? How did I go wrong? Maybe you're in a profession where you've reached the top of the peak of your success, and you're looking around going, this is it? This is all there is? Or maybe you feel like you've been in the wrong profession all this time. And finally, as life is changing, you start to look and think, was this even the right direction for my life? And is there time to make a change? Is there time to start again? There's a lot of professional challenges that come along at this particular stage of life as we begin thinking forward, looking backwards and thinking forward. A lot of times there's also loss of friendships, either because their lives are changing and things are happening, or even through death. I know as a mid 50 something, the list of my peers who are passing away is growing, and it's increasing in its rate. That people my age or people in my sphere are are getting severe illnesses or even dying. Failing health, which I just talked about with our peers. Sometimes it's our own failing health. Sometimes during this mid stage of life, we get our own diagnosis that kind of freaks us out, or maybe even seems to kind of rewrite our future. And all of a sudden, we've got this thing that we're living with and something that we just can't get around or get by. And it haunts us every day because we know that we're going to have to deal with this challenge. When we're younger, it's like our bodies snap back wash after wash, and it seems like we can do whatever, and we feel indestructible. But all of a sudden, in midlife, we begin to realize that we are not indestructible. As a matter of fact, there is a timestamp. There's an end date, an expiration date on this life. And not only our physical life, but we come to terms with the fact that someday we're going to move on from this realm, from this life. And in this realm, we will be no more. In a sense, people will forget about us. The world will move on. And what are we going to do about that? Right now, we feel like the world is our oyster. We're in the middle of it and everything else. But we begin to realize at midlife that all of that is coming to an end. How will it end? Will it end well? Am I going to leave a legacy? You see, we start thinking about these kinds of things. We start being concerned about having enough money to retire comfortably. We look at the limited number of productive years we have left and think, how is this all going to pan out? Am I going to have enough to retire on? Or am I going to be working till I'm 80 or beyond? We begin to wonder if the investments that we've made are going to be enough, if the direction that we're going is the right direction. We also, at this time, often feel kind of this bubbling up resentment, maybe over certain things in life, maybe betrayals. I know for a lot of people, they kind of skate through their early adult years. There's so much time and energy being put into building a family and building a career and all of those kinds of things that even past traumas, maybe even traumas from their childhood, say buried. But it's somewhere in these midlife years where circumstances kind of open up a gap, and even those past dramas come to the surface, and all of a sudden we have to deal with them. Or maybe there's some big betrayal from a friend or people that we cared about, maybe people we served that did not treat us with respect, people that talked behind our backs or hurt us in some kind of way. And in midlife, we seem to kind of find that it's important to figure that out. And all of a sudden, figuring out those past hurts and betrayals becomes very important. Midlife is a time where a lot of people struggle to find purpose or satisfaction in life. Sometimes we start out our adult years with the purpose of building a career, making money, building a family, creating a name for ourselves. It's very external, very outward, and we're going out. And then all of a sudden, we begin to feel somewhat of an emptiness inside. Like, what am I really here for? And where is this all going? And why am I doing what I'm doing? And sometimes even, who am I? And then, of course, the satisfaction issue. Sometimes at midlife, we just seem to all of a sudden not feel as satisfied. The things that we've chased after and that we've procured, many of them have disappointed us. We got everything that we wanted, or most of the things that we wanted, and they just didn't fill us up the way that we thought they might. And all of a sudden, we're kind of feeling this emptiness or this dissatisfaction with life. In the midlife years, we definitely feel a lack or a lowering of our physical and mental energy and vitality. And I know for me personally, I can't do the things I used to do. And all of a sudden, that makes me think about my value and my worth. Am I worth as much? Am I as valuable as I was? And what am I going to do with that? It's a time of reckoning, really. We begin to reckon with all of these kinds of what used to be outlying issues are now kind of coming to the center of our life and to the center of our focus. Tools and strategies that worked when we were young are losing their efficacy. I've done a lot of work with the Enneagram, our personality, the personality that we kind of adopted, that the coping mechanism that we embraced as a child to help us deal with the world as we understood it as a child, helped us even in our early adult years. But now the shadow side of that personality is beginning to catch up with us. And everybody's personality has a bright side, the part that everybody loves and the part that we feel confident about and the part that our ego is built around. But then there's also that shadow side. There's the part of our personality that's our weak point that causes difficulties and struggles. And so we have to begin to reckon with those things or come to terms with those things. We also have to come to terms with the fact that life is not about us. When we're little kids, everyone's cheering for us, supporting us, propping us up, helping us, moving us forward. And even as young adults, everybody's kind of cheering for us, wanting to see us succeed. Our parents are cheering us on, and everybody else wants us to succeed. They cheer us through school and they cheer us into our early career. But we kind of find that the cheering section sort of begins to fade at midlife. All of a sudden, everybody's cheering for the people that are younger than us, the children and the young adults and the people who are starting out a family and starting out in life. And we are the ones who are now supporting. We're now the ones who are cheering on those coming behind us. So all of a sudden, there's this change, and we have to come to terms with the fact that life is not about us. The universe does not center around us. And all of a sudden, we've got to grow up real quick. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think we go through all of our life up until midlife, thinking, when I grow up, I want to be. When I grow up, I want to accomplish this. And it's somewhere in that midlife stage that we all of a sudden, it's almost like we wake up one day and go, what's always been ahead of me is now in my rearview mirror. I am grown up. It's time for me to take responsibility. And sometimes that can throw us off a little bit. We become deeply aware of our own mortality. I talked about that a little bit earlier when we begin to think about illnesses and different things, reactions that our body is having to aging and things like that. And it's like all of a sudden we can see the end. We can see over the hill. Before that, we always see what's ahead of us, and we kind of are always looking toward what we're moving toward. And then all of a sudden, once we hit midlife, we can kind of see over the hill, and we can see that there's an end in sight. And we have to start thinking about the end. We have to start thinking about wrapping up this life. And it sounds really morbid to say that. So a lot of times we don't. That's part of the big problem with this whole midlife thing is almost all of these issues are things that we don't want to think about, and we surely are not talking about. Many of us are not talking about these things. I think that's one of the dangers. That's one of the problems, is that we're kind of struggling through this stuff, but we're finding ourselves wanting or having to do it alone. Huge part of the reason for this podcast is so that we can engage that conversation, so that we can get it out there and bring it all out in the open. Midlife is a time when we wonder if our life has peaked, if our best days are behind us, and now it's just kind of a long, slow slide to the end. We can feel as if we've accomplished the best that we can accomplish, and we wonder what's lying ahead and what's worth really fighting for or working toward or going after. Another thing, and I've talked to a handful of people about this. This is going to come out in some of the podcast episodes that we have coming up. But in midlife, our illusion of control is shattered. Things that we've fought so hard to control for most of our life begin to spin out of control. Things like our health, our relationships, our personality, our career, our own personal vitality and energy, our ego, the way that we present ourselves to the world. Things begin to break down in such a way that this illusion of control is shattered. And we come face to face with disappointments of unmet goals and expectations despite our best efforts. Many of us get to the place where now our energy is less than it was last year or last decade. and we think, man, if I couldn't achieve my goals, if I couldn't meet those expectations with the energy I used to have, how in the world am I going to do it now? And so we begin to struggle with a little bit of disappointment and things that maybe haven't ended up where we thought they might be, whether it be family and relationships, or whether it be our career, or whether it be accomplishments that we wanted to achieve. Sometimes we can come face to face with disappointment. I know that a lot of this sounds really negative, doesn't it? But it's important for us to pause and to actually think about the things that we're struggling with. Like I said earlier, some of us are struggling with many of these issues to great lengths, and some of us aren't struggling with many at all, or maybe they seem fairly mild. Some of us are struggling with these issues, and others are struggling with those issues. But I think all of us are facing a time of transition in life that's critical, and one that we have to be aware of and talking about and working through, and working through with very positive and life-giving solutions. A lot of this reminded me of a scripture in Psalm chapter 90, verse 12. This psalm, if you go back and read the whole psalm, Psalm 90, I'm wondering about the context. What was the psalmist thinking, and what were they experiencing when they were writing this? It very well could have been a midlife stage. It's kind of a dark psalm in a lot of ways. There's a lot of kind of gloom and doom kind of stuff. But right in the middle of it, it says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." You see, there's something about embracing reality that can cause us to really embrace a heart of wisdom. We call it youthful foolishness, or youthful. I'm not thinking of the word right now. You're probably thinking of it in your head. But basically, a lot of times we just kind of, in our early years, are running through life, kind of singing a song and with a dance in our step, and we're all starry-eyed and optimistic about everything. And it's in our midlife years where a lot of times we start to go, now, wait a minute. I thought things were going to be different. I thought things were going to be better than this. And it's not that life is terrible. We see in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, we see the writer of Ecclesiastes talking about life is meaningless, chasing after the wind, and all of these things. Those kind of thoughts begin to come at this stage of life. But really, it's a time where we may have some big decisions to make about how we're going to embrace our life, the world around us, our relationships, the reality of how life goes. Now, some of the symptoms that we can experience in midlife are anxiety. Sometimes, with all of this stuff happening, we can just begin to get a little bit anxious. Maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you're wondering, where is this anxiety coming from? Well, if you look at that lineup, that's a pretty good clue as to where all of that may be coming from. Sometimes people experience a loss of appetite, not necessarily physical appetite, but appetite for life or passion. For some people, life just kind of becomes dull. Again, back to Ecclesiastes chapter 6, where the teacher there, who's writing that, is saying life is meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind. This is a man who's Solomon, who's a man of tremendous wealth, a man of tremendous opportunity, power, fame, anything you could ever want. And he even describes the pursuit of stuff, going out and using all of that fame, using all of that wealth to get whatever his heart desired. And here he is later in life going, it's all meaningless. It doesn't even satisfy. And so a lot of times we begin to feel that in our midlife years. Exhaustion can set in. We can just get downright tired of the rat race, and our bodies, which don't have the same kind of energy that they used to have, we can experience some exhaustion. Confusion. Who am I? I thought I knew, but there's some signs that maybe I'm not who I thought I was, and I'm struggling with my identity. Maybe it's confusion about how to move forward in life. Okay, how do I get through this challenge or that disappointment or that heartbreak, that wound from my past? How do I forge a way moving forward from here? So confusion, maybe some depression. A lot of people experience depression. Suicide rates go up at midlife. And because a lot of people experience that kind of depression or cynicism. Maybe we get to a point in life where we're just kind of cynical about everything. We just don't want to be passionate about anything. Sometimes people feel anger, frustration. All of these different kinds of things can lead to just kind of an anger. And see, here's the problem. It can lead us to become grumpy old people. You know those people. You've met them. You've seen them. So let's talk about the outcomes. Because when we go through all of these things, we can either dig in our heels, we can grip the steering wheel harder and grab for more control. We can try more radical approaches to regain our lost youth and try to fight against the current, hoping to prove our fears are wrong. We can chase after pleasures with more gusto than ever. That's the whole iconic, you know, dumping your wife and finding a newer model and buying a red sports car and dressing like a teenager and all that kind of stuff. And that's what ultimately leads to grumpy old people, because we've already learned in life that those things are not going to satisfy us. They're not going to fill the deep void in our soul. Or the other outcome is this: we can let go of control. We can let go of being in charge of everything. We can accept the limitations of our life in faith. We can humble ourselves and invite God, who knows us, who created us, who gave us this life and put us in this world, who understands the brokenness and the sin of this world. We can turn to him and we can ask him and invite him to do the deep work in our soul to become more integrated people, more complete people. And what happens in that outcome is it leads to an acceptance, which delivers peace and allows joy to come forth. And it gives us a plan for the future. Actually, what it does is it shows us his plan for our future. Instead of becoming an angry, resistant, grumpy old person, we can be that person who finally is getting their hands on the keys to life, who is actually tending to their broken and weary soul and finding health and hope and healing in life. Some of those things that I listed aren't affecting me at all. Some of those things I've already experienced some level of victory over. Some of those things I've whipped them already, or maybe at least I'm in the process of whipping them. But some of those things are still kicking my butt. How about you? If you're tuning in, I'm sure that you've identified or connected with at least one of those things, and you feel that midlife is something worth having a conversation or several conversations about. I'm personally determined not to let midlife be a crisis. I want it to be a meaningful part of my overall journey as a human being. Just like there's all these different stages in life. There's the kid years, right? There's those years of joyful innocence. There's some pain there too. But for the most part, we kind of bounce back and we kind of bubble up and we kind of just enjoy those years being a kid, not knowing a whole lot about life and not feeling the need to know a lot about life. And then we go through our teenage years. Those are the kind of coming of age or the kind of becoming a person. That's when we decide who we're going to be, not just as a career, but our character, who we're going to be as a person and what kind of life we want to live and what kind of person we're going to be moving forward. We kind of build our ego in that stage, our image of who we are going to be and how we're going to show up in the world. And then with that ego, with that personality, we head into marriage and we head into career. And at that point, we're all in. We're going for it. We're full steam ahead, and we're working hard and we're pushing and we're building and we're creating, and we're just like going as if if we're indestructible and we're trying to accomplish all of those things, right? And midlife comes along, but it's just one of the stages in life. And there's stages after midlife. Obviously, this is just the midpoint of our adult years, right? But I want to turn my midlife crises or the challenges that I'm facing in midlife into a meaningful midlife season. I want this to be a time of growth. I want this to be a time of discovery. I want this to be a time of embracing reality. I want this to be a time where I'm turning inward. Instead of living so much outward, I want to turn inward. And I want this to be a time where I really pay attention to my soul. And when I look back 10 years from now, I want to be able to point to this season as a catalyst to growth and rebirth and preparation for the beauty of my next season or my current season from 10 years in the future. I want a victorious second half, and I'm determined to go after that. And this podcast is for anybody else who says, I'm determined to go after a successful uh, second half of life, and somebody who wants to end well, and somebody who wants to leave a powerful legacy for those who will come behind. So, as I said earlier, I'm not the current or the resident expert who's going to tell you how to do this, but I'm the guy who's curious. I'm the guy who's going to bring in some guests and I'm going to ask them the questions to pull their story out of them, pull their experiences out of them, so that together we can understand and we can learn and we can grow and we can discover together. So I hope that this will be something that you will join me on and something that we can do together and even build a community, a tribe of people who are on this journey together. So here's what we're going to do. Each week, I will be discussing life with people who have their own midlife story to share. We're going to verbally process their stories and their experiences. We're going to discuss their failures and disappointments. We've got a couple of episodes already recorded, and I'm telling you, people get pretty vulnerable, and that's pretty powerful. But they're also going to share their insights and their life-giving shifts, the way that they've shifted their life and the ways that they're growing and the ways that they're being rebirthed as a person. We're also going to look at biblical principles to give us answers for how to handle this season and prepare for the next seasons. And we're going to look for God's handwriting in our life, God's direction, God's wisdom, His direction for us, so that we can experience the life that He has in store for each one of us. Here's the core message I want you to hear. It's never too late to turn the ship around or to turn the game around. It's never too late. We've seen some of the most amazing, memorable games we've ever seen are the ones where our team was losing going into halftime. And man, it looked like there was no way they were going to win. But whatever happened in that locker room changed everything. They came out the third quarter and everything was different. My hope is that that can be my story. That can be your story. And together we can discover the things that we need to learn during this phase of life. So maybe your first half of your adult years weren't the best. Let's make the second half better. I believe that our best days are ahead. Will you believe with me? Will you lean in? Will you get on this journey with us to discover a victorious second half? So that's kind of my vision for this whole thing. I don't know. I hope some of that resonated with you. If not, no big deal. But I've got to believe there's a lot of people that resonated with. So you're invited to come along on the journey or to come and hang out in the locker room with us. Each halftime, we're going to release an episode. My goal is to release an episode every Monday. I want to create an episode for you to be able to engage at the beginning of the week. So whatever your time is, I'm sure for me personally, I have certain times throughout the week. I listen to different podcasts. Whenever I'm doing mindless activities where I don't have to focus my attention on something, I've got earbuds in and or earbuds in, and I'm listening to somebody else, and I'm learning and I'm growing. And so whenever that time is for you, I want that episode to be available to you at the beginning of the week. And it doesn't end with the podcast. the online episode, but we're also going to have a Facebook group. We have a Facebook group. I invite you to come and be a part of that Facebook group. And here's what we're going to do in the Facebook group. I'm inviting my guest who was on the episode that week to come and hang out in our Facebook group for that week. Some of my guests have already signed up for the Facebook group, and they're like, I want to be in all the time. That'll be a place for you to meet them. So maybe something happened during the podcast that spoke to your heart. You'll be able to reach out to that individual and actually connect with them. It's also going to be a place where other midlifers are going to hang out and where we'll have conversations. I hope to create a few conversation starting posts for each episode. And so if you come into the group during the week, you'll find some questions there that you can engage. You can share your own thoughts. You can read the thoughts of other people and see how other midlifers are engaging, not just with the episodes, but with their own midlife journey. It's going to be a place where I want to put links to resources. I want to put tips, maybe some encouraging quotes or posts, different things like that. And it'll be a place where we can gather together. So that Facebook group is going to be an important part of this whole podcast thing. I'm also planning to do some sideline snippets. These are little thoughts from Milan. I guess those are other times where I won't have a guest on, but it'll just be me sharing my thoughts from an episode or from a scripture I read that week or from something that God is teaching me in my own life. So I really want to encourage you to consider how deeply you want to just kind of step into this thing. It doesn't have to be some big, huge commitment. If you don't show up for a week, no big deal. No love lost, obviously, and it's not going to be a big deal to everybody else. But I do think that that you'll be missing out, and so I would hate for you to miss out on that. So make sure you subscribe. This podcast will be available on Apple. It'll be available on Spotify, and a video version will be available on YouTube. So wherever you get your podcasts or wherever you feel most comfortable engaging with podcasts, I would encourage you to subscribe to this podcast on that platform. I am praying for this podcast, for the people who will listen and the people that will be reached through this. And I encourage you to help us reach more people. If you're in midlife, then you know other midlifers. You know other people who are struggling. Or maybe you're beyond midlife. Maybe you're one of those people that's looking back 10 years later or 20 years later. And you're watching because you've experienced those things and you have something to add. I want to encourage you to participate as well, and maybe share this podcast with other young people who are following in your footsteps, who are 10 or 20 years behind you in your own journey. Let's get this word out there. Let's share this podcast, because you never know. Maybe it's not a big deal for you. Maybe it doesn't click for you, but maybe the things that I talked about, will click with somebody else. Please take a moment to share this opportunity with them. All right. I guess that's about all I have to say right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up this this first episode. This is the first episode of my podcast, and I'm going to wrap it up now. And I want to just say, if you're still listening, thank you for hanging in there, for listening. I hope that this has been an encouragement to you. I hope it's helped you to understand what this is about, what to expect, and how you might be able to engage most effectively. I'm going to be praying for this podcast, for our guests, and absolutely for you, our listeners, our audience, the people who will be tuning in week after week. May God bless you and keep you, and may He show you the way forward so that all of us can experience the best second half. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for watching episode 1 of the Halftime Podcast. I hope that monologue, I guess it was just a monologue this time, I hope that was encouraging and helpful to you. And I hope it helped brighten your day. I did want to turn your attention to those who have helped me get this podcast off the ground. And I, first of all, want to just say, if you're one of those individuals, thank you so much. I'm talking to those who have supported financially, those who have prayed for this podcast and for me, and who've also sent me words of affirmation and encouragement through texts or phone calls or even on Messenger. And just want to let you know how much that means to me. And I do have a list of those who contributed financially in the show notes. So please go there and read that list of individuals and help me thank God for them and their support. I also wanted to give you a heads up that the next episode, episode 2, is with Charles Barkley. And that was a fascinating conversation about his new book, Rebuild. And we talk about rebuilding in the middle years and what it means to rebuild some of the things that have fallen apart, as we talked about in this episode. But fascinating episode and a lot of fun. And so I hope you'll join us there and check that out. Also, lastly, just wanted to point you toward our Facebook group and want to encourage you to go and check that out and become a part of the ongoing conversation and find additional resources and a place to meet other midlifers and such. So hope that you will engage in the rest of the community there. God bless. Thanks again for watching, and we'll hope to see you soon.